Welcome back to the PR Playbook podcast. We are here with Anthony Burness, co-CEO, co-founder of Cooler Keg. Hi, Anthony. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
Great. So, we're going to talk about your journey. Cooler Keg is a cool product, and so let's talk about first. Before we get started, I guess we should just preface everybody. What is the Cooler Keg, and why is it cool?
Our tagline is Cooler Keg is draft anything, anywhere. And so to answer what the product is, it's kind of fun because, a lot of people will see it and they think one thing and it's not 100% right because it looks like a jockey box. It looks like a kegerator. But what's different about our product is that it uses corny kegs, which are meant for typically more like home brewers. So you can fill them yourself.
Okay.
So instead of just beer, like you don't go to the store and buy a keg and put it in the cooler keg and use it. It's you fill it yourself with fresh draft from the brewery. You can fill it with cans and bottles. You can fill it with orange juice and champagne. You can fill it with margaritas. It is anything on draft and then it goes in a cooler and you can take it anywhere.
Very cool. So you guys launched a Kickstarter project in 2022, I think,
Correct.
and or it was it Indiegogo or Kickstarter?
Indiegogo.
Let's start with that. So actually, okay, we're gonna ask this question later. So first, let's get a little bit of background on the Cooler Keg and the
Yes.
crew of the
Okay.
Cooler Keg. So I saw you have a great team that you have put together. You have a co-CEO. Tell
Mhm.
us how you put together your team. I think a lot of people have interest in how startup founders kind of get together.
Well, I mean, my co-founder, Racine, she's my co-founder in business and life. She's my everything. So we're life
That's how
partners,
you found
business
her.
partners. Exactly. We've been together for 14 years. And I mean, we invented this product and the first idea came of it while hanging out at her parents' lake house with friends,
Mhm.
just having fun on the lake. Her parents retired and live in Michigan. So yeah, that's kind of how
So
the team was, created is that we were, we were already
So
together.
were you guys just, like, bouncing back ideas? Like, was it just something that I saw the little story on the Cooler Keg website, but I think, like, a product like this, you can always talk about something and it never happens, right? So how did this actually come to be?
So, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's like, it is one of our like, stories that we do tell a lot, but it's the story. I can't help it.
Yeah.
It's what happened is that, yeah, her parents were retired to Michigan and we would go out with friends and stay there for the weekend because they
Uh-huh.
just, they had a boat and it's on the lake and it's just fun. And, we'd get little floaties and we'd go out in the water and, we drank all afternoon and just have a blast. And inevitably we just got better at it. So like the
Uh-huh.
next year we had better floats. We then the next year got carabiners and paracord so we could like tie ourselves together into a giant lily pad and people would
Right.
stop floating away in the current. We got an anchor so the whole group would stop moving. We got a float for the cooler so that we'd have to stop going to shore for like food and beer runs. We got like little like floats for like, food and for the cooler and everything. And it just got to the point where after like 8, 9 years, we're out there floating and just kind of laughing about how we become experts at relaxing and floating on the lake.
Right.
What are we gonna do next year that's better?
Right.
And that's where it's just, honest to God, my friend was just like, "Next year we need a swim up bar." And I'm a project guy. I love tools. I love building stuff. So I was like, "I'll build the bar like anything you want it to look like. You want it to be
Yeah.
modern, you want it to be, you know, look like something like the Vikings, you want it to be an Irish pub. Like, what do you want this bar to look like?" He's like, "No, no, no, no." He goes, "I don't care what the swim up bar looks like. I want
Uh-huh.
to be able to pour draft beer when I float up to that bar."
Right.
And so I was like, so not even in the boat, I got to get the draft in the water.
In the water.
And so that's when I went home to the drawing board. I've been a home brewer at the time for 10 years. So now I've been a home brewer for almost 15, but I just knew a little bit about the equipment around beer.
Sure,
And
of
so I'm
course.
just like, wait a minute, if I take this and I do that and I just started
Yeah.
designing it and making it smaller and smaller and more efficient.
Getting excited,
Yeah,
in the process.
exactly. And like, wait a minute, this will work. We can make this happen.
It's funny, you mentioned a lot of times that, like, you mentioned that most people set out to solve a problem, and we talk to a lot of startups, so that's usually what they say, like, "Oh, we were solving the problem of so and so."
Yeah,
And you guys were kind of solving a problem. Your own problem is
100%.
how do we get bigger and better next
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then it's the rule of entrepreneurship, is the rule of a startup is like, don't come up with a problem and find a don't come up with a solution and find a problem it solves.
Yeah.
Instead, you find a problem and you find an elegant solution. And that's what we did because we were like, we want better drink options in the middle of the water.
Right.
How do we do that? And so we solved it. So this is awesome for the boat, for floating, for RVs and tailgating, you name it.
So how'd you guys get from concept to Kickstarter or to Indiegogo to crowdfunding?
So the original prototype was, said that really funny. Prototype was simply a fun thing that I built in my basement for my friends.
Okay.
Like I just did it for me and my friends because I wanted it for the lake.
Right.
And it was when I showed it to them, they were like, you just made something. They're like, you need to bring this to the world. And we're like, really? And I was like, yes. And so that's when we started doing research and checking around to see that like, oh, there's like other things on the market that were smaller and there's other things on the market that were bigger. But we kind of talked about that like Goldilocks zone where we
Mhm.
were just right.
Just right, yeah.
Exactly. So like that's when, we built a basic prototype, which at the time again wasn't a prototype. It was just what we wanted. And from there, we're like, okay, we're doing research to see what else was available. What do we have to do to make this manufacturable? And that's when we just started you know, thankfully the internet is here and
Yes, absolutely. Well,
research
in
is
2022,
yeah.
in 2022, like, crowdfunding was pretty sophisticated by then, because it started in 2011. So
Kickstarter,
you had a
Indiegogo.
decade in,
Yes.
and I'm
Well,
sure I mean, who came up with that idea to kind of be like, "Oh, let's pre-order, let's do these
I don't
pre-orders."
I don't know if it was Racine or I who first came up with the idea, but it's just something we talked about because it's one of these things where if you are going to design a new, I don't know, butcher block, cutting board, you can do market research. You
Right.
can say that for this specific style of cutting board that's also a lazy Susan and has a toaster built in, I don't know, it's going to be able to carve out this market share of the cutting board market. You can do
Right.
that research. But with our product, it was novel enough that we could compare it to things, but we couldn't just do the brute force market research with the information that was available. So we're
Mm,
like, it's close to a traditional, it's just like a Yeti cooler, but a Yeti cooler is not a kegerator.
right.
Sure, a kegerator serves things on draft, but it's not portable. So like we were looking and comparing it to a lot of different products. And that's when we were like, you know what? It makes a lot of sense to do crowdfunding to
Mm.
make sure that the market exists that we think is there before we go getting, over our heads and business dead
Yeah.
and find
No,
out later that the market doesn't exist.
absolutely. So, this is a conversation I had with someone just yesterday, and
Mm,
I told them, like, "If you don't have to do crowdfunding, don't do it." And I basically said, it is more nowadays. Before it was something else, okay? It's like the first 5 years was something, and then the
yes.
next 5 years was something. But nowadays, it's more of a validation, market research, like exactly like you're saying, and I love
I,
that you're saying that
I
because
100% agree with what you're saying.
it's very hard. It's not as easy as everyone thinks.
Well, like, because back in the day, crowdfunding was created for just people to come up with a product and see if the world wanted it and it was more approachable. Now, this is just my opinion because I don't want to get in
Yeah.
trouble for saying this. But unfortunately, like a lot of people with deep pockets have turned crowdfunding into, like you said, it's just market validation to see if something works. Because why
Yeah.
should a large company that has all the money in the world to bring a product to market to find out that it fails? And that might cost them 5 million bucks when
Right.
instead for 250 grand, they
Yeah.
can find out through heavy marketing for the Kickstarter or the
Right.
Indiegogo whether or not there's actually demand. So they're like, oh, we can just burn a little bit of cash in
And
advertising,
then we'll be okay. Yeah.
and then they'll know, oh, okay, in that case, they want it. Cool. Let's ramp it up and actually come to market. So for the rest of us, you can get drowned out by some of these players that have deep pockets.
Yeah, I like that you said that. So speaking of deep pockets, what was the most surprising thing that you found out about crowdfunding? I know a lot of people don't realize how expensive it is.
Yes.
But what about for you? What was the most surprising thing about running that campaign?
I think I came in with the same naive glasses that I think probably most everyone has, which is you're going to be successful if it's a great product and you go viral.
Yeah.
That's just simply not how it works at all. That maybe is how like they designed it in its infancy.
Right.
Now it's one of these things where for a successful campaign, you have to do pre-marketing before your campaign ever starts. So like for us, I mean, we were doing advertising and testing different markets for 5 months, with a landing page, a splash page where we're collecting people's emails and
Uh-huh.
like getting to the point so that it's like, okay, when we actually launched the campaign, we had, 22,000 emails of people who said, that's a cool product. I'm interested,
Yeah,
which is why when we launched the campaign, you're able to just hit the ground running, and like do well. But like
absolutely.
you just start your campaign and then just start randomly posting on social media. Like this is why, it's fascinating. We talked to a couple people and to raise over $100,000 puts you in the top 1% of all crowdfunding that's ever done ever
Yeah.
in the history of all crowdfunding. So it shows that we did very, very well. But at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, you can't do that if you just throw up some information and post it on, your social media and hope for the best. Not
Yeah,
saying you may catch lightning in a bottle, but
possibly. I mean, I think it was easier. So it's like you're basically verbalizing everything that I've experienced.
mm,
The very first crowdfunding campaign that we actually ran back in 2011 hit $1 million. It was just like a one off, right? And then the next one hit 800,000 and then so on and so forth. We had a lot of great successful campaigns, but this is 2011, okay? And that was without the gel ups of the world and the marketing, advertising, and digital marketing. It was without all of that.
yep,
We used pure media for that stuff. And it was so crazy because the media was like so into crowdfunding. They were like so excited about it. And then these companies that were actually developing these products were engineers. They were like engineers that were behind the scenes in the past, but now wanted to be in front, right? Like wanted to create a new product. So we had some cool different products that we did. And then slowly but surely, like the media got so jaded. And
mm,
then it was harder and harder to get people to come to your campaign because the media
yep,
didn't want to cover it. So now you have to acquire these emails that you're talking about.
yep,
And so that requires an investment when you're in advertising, Google ads, Facebook ads, all those things.
yeah,
And I think people were like, "Oh, we'll just do some press and, that'll drive traffic." And now it's almost the opposite. It's like you're hard pressed to get media coverage on your campaign
yes,
because I was going to ask you a little bit about how did that work? Like, obviously, you're getting visibility through ads, but you're paying for that. Were
correct.
you guys? How was your presence in the media, and how did that work for you?
So I would say two things on that topic. One, 2011 is very different than 2024.
Yeah.
So social media, I don't know when the algorithms really switched over, but
Flipped?
it's very much pay to play.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, 10, 20 years ago, if you had a crazy cool idea and you put it out on social media, it could just go like wildfire and the
Right.
algorithm just allowed for that. But nowadays it's like, no, they're going to shut it down until you start paying them. It's like, yeah, it just is the reality of the situation. And then as far as PR is concerned, we didn't have a whole lot of success because one of the, I'd say, like broken record responses we get from
Can
outlets
I
is,
get a cooler keg?
yes. It's like, well, no, we're doing crowdfunding so that we can make them. So you don't have any inventory and people can't sell them. We're not running an article because we
How do
don't.
we know you're gonna make it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're like, we're not playing that game
Did you
unless,
guys did you guys take a look at the coolest cooler?
yes,
I
which
I'm
is,
I'm guessing, right?
yeah, which is
Which is I invested my $89 and I never got a cooler.
exactly. So that it's kind of funny. That's a blessing and a curse is people knew about coolers and, crowdfunding
Yeah.
specifically to us because we're a custom cooler. And they're like, we've heard great and horrible things about
Yeah.
coolers and crowdfunding.
Here's my margarita machine. I was so
Exactly.
excited. Like
I mean, some people got a coolest cooler. It did, come to market. It just couldn't fulfill all the orders.
well, no, they got it because they paid extra. So, like,
Oh,
basically, at one point, the backer updates were, "Hey, we're having trouble in production, blah, blah, blah. If you want your cooler, you can pay another $150 to get
oh,
your cooler." So
yeah,
those people were, like, in. They were committed. They were like,
right.
"Yes, I want it.
Want it. Yeah.
I've already spent $80. I'm gonna get" or whatever they
That's
spent.
wild.
Yeah.
That's
So the
wild.
people who actually got it were the people who paid
More.
extra to get it. Yeah.
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 I mean, and I can speak from my experience trying to put together a product like that. You said they were originally selling it for like $90.
Yeah, the it was like what is it called? The early perk?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, was like $90.
That was an aggressive target price. Wow.
Well, and that's a great conversation to have. So, tell me a little bit about the pricing and how are you advised to price your product, and what would you recommend to other crowdfunders?
Oh Lord, that is a great question, and I do not have a good answer for it.
Okay.
I have talked to people across the spectrum, and I've heard a lot of different things. From the standpoint, like, okay, so let's say you have a product that costs you $100, just for easy numbers.
Yeah,
I've heard from some people, like, unless you have a 3x markup, like unless you can make it for 100 and sell it for
you're not.
300, you know, you're
That's
wasting your
it.
time. I've
Yeah.
heard people say it's 4x,
Wow.
okay. And then I've heard other people talk about like profit margins. And like, so when you look at CPG, like consumer packaged goods or physical products for that matter, the profit margins on that can be much, much less. So that
Mhm.
when you scale and you look at somebody who's selling thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of units, they might only have a profit margin of 10%,
Right.
which I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Man, I got people telling me you gotta have like a 400% profit margin. I got
Yeah.
telling me you have to
That's
have
a
a
big range.
10%. So I'm like, I don't know if it's just different schools of thoughts and different ways of like, manipulating the numbers and statistics. But I will say you need to go down the path. And this goes back to actually, we're talking about crowdfunding. Our mistake was not going further down the path of manufacturing early
Mm.
because the cost to get the ball rolling is not that prohibitive.
Oh, okay.
The cost comes later. So
Right.
initially, like for example, so we talked to a number of different companies who can connect you with factories abroad.
Mhm.
So our product is made in China. We look to have it made in the US. And the dynamic there was obviously we can make anything in the United
Yeah.
States. I mean, Tesla's made here, Ford and GM, like we can make cars, like we can make planes, we can make anything. If the factory was big enough to make our product, we were too small.
Okay.
Because like we can absolutely make your product. How many hundreds of
We
thousands of
need a
units,
minimum, yeah.
right, would you like us to make? And I'm like, no, our first product run's gonna be like 600. And then to work with somebody who said, like, we love startups, we will work with you, no problem. They're like, we don't have equipment large enough to make product. So
Oh,
we were stuck again in that Goldilocks zone where this was too small and this was too big, and there was nobody that we could find in the middle that could work with us. So we worked with an outsourcing partner and we talked to a number of them that connect you with factories abroad. And we did a search through all the different zones, trying, Latin America, Eastern Europe, India, China, you name it, like everywhere. And then we interviewed a couple factories in India as well as China before we settled on one that we went with. And I lost my train of thought of how I was. Oh yeah. So that process, the cost is a few $1,000s to do like a factory search, to have these first conversations.
sure.
You need to work with somebody to give them your designs so that they can then like start like figure out what's the cost to get the tooling, the molding. And this took months for a few $1,000s. And then the
Right.
cost comes later when you're like, okay, let's make the tooling, let's make the molding, let's get the samples. You got to pay for your production run. That all came later. So you can do like 6 months of the process, 8 or 9
Right.
months of the process up front for a few $1,000s and be much further ahead of the game
Well,
because
and also with your product, you made the first
yes,
one.
yes,
So,
exactly.
technically, you could just make another one
Yes, very
to
slowly.
just I mean, just to have those early prototypes, right?
Yeah,
Like the
exactly. Oh,
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
what I did.
yeah.
Once we had a 3D model, I was having parts 3D printed through different
Okay.
services, and I cobbled together the next prototypes that looked and functioned as it should.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, for crowdfunding, you should definitely get the ball rolling on manufacturing ahead of time because we finished our campaign and then I was like, okay, and now let's start manufacturing from day one. That was a
Yeah.
that was a big mistake on our part.
Well, it's a cautionary tale a little bit.
Yeah.
I think these are you don't know what you don't know until you
No,
get there.
and
And
yeah, this is all hindsight.
yeah,
Like I
yeah,
didn't know.
yeah,
I talked to a
absolutely.
couple people. They're like, oh yeah, it'll take 3 to 6 months,
Yeah.
15 months.
Well, so that takes us here to February. You guys have shipped your units and what does it look like today? And, how are you feeling today about manufacturing and kind of diving into the actual real thing? Because right now you've been in like elementary school. Now you're like, or like high school, you're going into the real world,
Yeah,
college,
seriously.
whatever. So like, how does that feel? What is your next steps and how are you guys planning that based on what you've learned?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. So talking about learnings, we got very lucky with our Indiegogo crowdfunding. We went viral on TikTok and we had a video get like 2.3 million views. And it just,
Awesome.
yeah, honestly, it saved our campaign. Quite
Uh-huh.
honestly, like TikTok to the rescue. All right. So we are getting Cooler Keg ready. So we got some PBR. Let's see here. It's got to go this way. Got to read your in and out. And some Stella Artois. So that goes in. Then, so ice packs are in the bottom. And then we got our CO2 system, which when you put these things in, you got to go real fast because they will hiss at you. Get it on and shut. All right, so hook it up to the PBR. Make sure it's at the right pressure. So about 12. Disconnect, hook it up to the other one. Get it to the same pressure. And this one we actually just added beer to, so you pull the thing. That lets all the room air out of the headspace. So now they are the same pressure. All right, CO2 is hooked up. Grab our draft tower. Open the pass-through. That comes off. All right. So I'm gonna have a better solution eventually, but I know the blue one goes to that side. So Stella is on the left. PBR is on the right. And we are ready to pour draft. Yeah. And so once we kind of got to the point where it's like, okay, we ordered our units and they were inbound. We're like, what are we going to do to launch? Like, yes, our company has launched. We do have product for sale. And we're like, how are we going to do that? We're like, well, we had success in that in the past. And so you have to kind of like restart the engines of social media because they don't like it when you have a whole lot of followers and a whole lot of views and then you go dark for a year.
Right.
Algorithm's not a big
Thank
fan.
you. Thank you. I try to tell people that all the time.
Algorithm really doesn't like that. So I went from like making posts and getting tens of thousands, 10, 20, 30,000 views, even on a post that didn't do well.
Uh-huh.
Like posting, I was like, oh, 200 views. Oh, that's where we're at. Okay. And so what we did actually is we had the first 10 units off the production line flown over because that was very expensive.
Uh-huh.
That's not something we could do for hundreds of units. But we had
Yeah.
10 flown over and we actually got into a car and we did a road trip hand delivering the first units to the
Oh,
very first people that backed our campaign.
oh, and then you videoed it?
Social media, the whole thing.
That's
And
awesome.
that's how we kind of turned our engines back on. So after, a 6-week road trip, we actually ended it at CES in Las Vegas. And so it was an amazing road trip. And now our social media engines are like firing on all cylinders. And now we're getting to the point where it's like, okay, now our social media's turned back on. The last 3 weeks, 4 weeks has just been like our product has like actually got here and we were QCing like crazy, just spending all day, all night in the warehouse, going through product, making sure it was right and getting it all shipped out to those first, 350 so backers who've been waiting, I'll say patiently, some impatiently, for their cooler, which, it's been a long time, but
Yeah,
getting those all shipped out. And yeah. And now we're looking at basically how are we going to quote unquote launch this business? And
right.
so we will be at the Cincinnati like home expo, I
Okay.
think like a week and a half, because a lot of people love this product for their basement, their garage,
Absolutely.
like a pool, barbecue pit. You know what I mean? It has a lot of use cases around the house. So we're
Yeah.
going to start going to like trade shows, expos, boat shows, RV shows, things like that, outdoor home and garden.
You
Uh,
were I have to dive into this a little bit before
okay.
I forget this question. But, like, you were talking a little bit about, you're talking about locations and where you could put it.
Yeah.
Like, you can fill it up with anything. You had mentioned this.
Yes.
And so this is obviously a little side convo, but, like, can you just pour cans of beer in there?
Yes. And again, and it's so funny. And I understand, people have very strong opinions on this.
Yeah.
You tell me it won't work, even though I do it on video and then I
Mhm.
serve it and it works. I don't know what to tell them, but yes, you can.
Okay.
They're like, you're losing all the carbonation. I'm like,
Right.
it has a CO2 system. It puts
Right.
it back in, and I tell everybody, because like if you set up the cooler cake and you use it right away,
Mhm.
it's not going to be as perfect as it could be. I always tell people, you're having a party on Saturday, set it up on Thursday, set it up on Friday.
Right. Get it
Fill it up.
warmed
Yeah,
up.
exactly. Well, because it's like, if you're going to take the kegs into your local brewery and get some like fun local draft that's not even available outside of
Mhm.
the tap room, you can do that. And you take the kegs, you get them filled, you hook up the CO2, the kegs are now pressurized, you can let the room air out. Now it's, literally it's draft beer, pressurized CO2 in the keg. You throw them in your fridge. And when you go to use them, they're perfect. The temperature's right, the carbonation's right. It serves just the way you want it to. Same
Right.
goes for cocktails, cans of beer, bottles of beer, whatever. So,
How do
you
you
put 'em
keep it cold?
so the kegs, we recommend just throw it in your fridge until you're ready to
Okay.
use it. And then the cooler itself, we have 4 custom ice packs
I saw
that
the
are
ice
like,
packs on your
yeah, that
site.
are like
Yep.
molded to the, shape of the kegs and the cooler itself. And so those will keep it cold. So long as you keep the lid shut.
Okay.
Obviously, you, your friend, and every neighbor keeps opening the lid to look at what's inside. It's going to get warm and stay warm. But when we keep the lid shut, it'll keep it cold, like under 40 degrees for like 3 days.
Oh, wow, that's a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. It'll keep it cold and good to go for a while.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Yeah, sorry. I
Yep.
had to do the little side note because I wanted like, it just seems I guess, it just seems crazy that you could just pour things in there and it would work,
Yeah.
Like, it feels like it needs to be professionally done or
Right.
something.
But no, it's just like, no, it's like we filled it with margaritas, we filled it with Cosmos, filled it with rum and Coke, you know,
So, okay, when you fill it with a margarita, you don't carbonate it, do you?
you can.
But do you have to?
You don't have to. So if you fill up
Okay.
margaritas and then you just turn it on and use it, it'll come out still just the way you put it in.
Okay.
But if you wait 12 hours, it's going to start to have that little like tingle of carbonation.
Fuzzy.
If you wait a day or two, you're like, it's a sparkling margarita. I didn't
Uh,
even know this was possible.
this is awesome. Actually, I
This
love
is changing
carbonation.
everything.
I love carbonation, so I'll take carbonated anything.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's a lot of fun. And it's a new twist on just even what's an option.
right.
So yeah.
Right. No, that's very cool. Okay. So we're coming back to today
Yes.
and launching in the market. So
Yep.
what are you guys working on? How are you developing this, process of get coming out to market? You've done your first 350 so units.
Yep.
And now, are you guys looking for retailers? Are you going to be selling online? What is the plan?
So our plan is to crawl before we walk.
Okay.
One of the quick ways to fail as a startup is to get too big too fast,
Right.
because we need to mature our supply chain and get into a nice cadence of know what we can deliver. The worst thing we could do is get connected with a giant distributor
Oh yeah.
retailer who's like, we need 20,000 units in the next 3 months. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have the capital. You know what I mean? It's just like, whoa. So, we want to go through trade shows, expos, kind of start getting into paid ads, start doing different things, and just start to feel how quickly and how robustly, the public responds, and
Mhm.
make sure that we are selling at a rate that allows us to like continue to have inventory. Cause
Scale nicely, like in a manageable way.
right. Cause you
Right.
don't want to get to a point where it's like, okay, we could go to this, for example, I mentioned this, what is it? Like Cincinnati Home Expo, and we could be sold out in a weekend. I don't know.
You
Anything could
don't know.
happen.
Yeah.
And we don't want to get to a position where all of a sudden something happens and then we're back ordered and people are frustrated because I heard about this and I can't get one. And you're not going
And
to
they
have,
don't come back most of the time. So yeah.
right. And in our situation, it takes like 8 weeks to get another delivery.
Mhm.
So, you know,
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
just snap my fingers and get more inventory tomorrow.
Right, absolutely. So I guess that now that question comes into play as far as media and PR. Now you're in a position where people are going to probably want to listen to you and experiment with the product. What is your plan for reaching out to media? How do you already have a list of media that are interested? Like
Mhm.
what is the whole
So we did a lot of media reach out, as I mentioned, during the Indiegogo
sure.
crowdfunding. So we actually do have a list of a lot of media that were interested in the product, but not interested when we were doing Indiegogo because
Right.
we didn't have product on hand. So again, this is just now where we're like, we need to crawl
Mhm.
and like reach out to a few, see how people react. go to this, see how it reacts, because we just keep
Right.
it in over our head. So we're taking a very cautious approach, and just ease our, we're not going to slam the gas and trying to get to 100 miles an hour as fast as possible.
Right.
Like let's go
Well, what
5
is
miles an hour for a mile or two. It
what
might
is
take
the
a while.
retail price for the cooler keg?
The retail price is 9.49. Right
Okay.
now we're doing a launch sale for 7.99. So
Okay.
yeah, that's where we're currently at.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's not too bad for what what you're getting for sure. And then the price of coolers anyway is like crazy now. Everybody wants like something that, oh my gosh, we were having this whole thing about the Stanley Cup. And
Yes.
it's like the demand for these
Yeah.
kinds of things is so weird.
Well, then I don't know if you've been seeing, but like all over my feed with the Stanleys, you got people like taking drills to them and then doing lead tests.
Like, I haven't seen that.
I don't know if it's a knockoff Stanley or the real thing, but like I've seen like a lot of things on my social where people are like, it's got lead in the metal.
Oh,
Just like there's like a drama going on right now. I don't know the truth or the false to it, but I'm like,
it's not like BPA free.
right. I'm just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, no, no lead Stanleys. No, thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is definitely like a booming area of I don't know, consumer products, I think. This is really cool. I mean, you have a lot of really cool things coming up, and I think, it'll be exciting to see how you guys fare. I think with media, you're gonna do awesome. So whoever you do send it to,
Yeah,
you're right, you need to be prepared. That's actually one of the cautions I kinda tell people is like, "Okay, well, we could do media, but are you ready for what's gonna potentially happen?"
exactly.
And it doesn't always happen right away. Sometimes it happens later. You just never know. We had an e-bike company that we worked with, and we got them into I think it was like digital trends, but then a week later, they launched it on Yahoo's platform, and it went like nuts, and they ran out of inventory really quick. A problem they wanted to have, but
Right.
but still, it's like you don't know what's gonna happen
Oh,
right after that. Yeah.
I mean, we go viral tomorrow and I wake up and we're sold out and backed ordered. I mean, that'll be a good problem to
Yeah.
have.
Well, speaking of, did so from what I read in your background, you were an ER nurse, is that correct?
Correct. I was a ER nurse for a few years before the pandemic started, and I was a travel nurse all through the pandemic.
Okay, and then so are you still a nurse is the question?
I do have a nursing license in, I think, 3 states right now,
Okay,
but I have not worked actively since Christmas of 2021.
okay,
So I quit my job and started doing this full time. Racine was doing it part time while maintaining her day job, so to speak.
okay.
And she came on full time about halfway through last year. So now we're both knee deep, 100% in it.
Living the dream. Did
All
you
right,
ever
yeah.
expect, like, to do this? I mean, that's a whole different world. So, like
I mean, it is, but I mean, before it's one of those things. I've done it all. Before nursing, I my undergrad was in chemistry,
okay,
so I was actually a formulation chemist for a few years before giving that up. And my first foray at trying to start a business, I worked with nonprofits as a doing a consultancy with videography.
okay.
So yeah, so this is my second attempt at entrepreneurship and but like chemistry and home brewing, it kind of all came full
Yeah,
circle.
that makes sense, that makes sense.
A little here, a
Yeah.
little there, but in the end, it's all science and drinking.
So so out of all this, what do you think is the most surprising thing that you've learned from the process so far?
That is a broad question. I'd say the most surprising thing has been how easy and how hard it is to get a product made.
Hmm,
Because in hindsight, I'm like, oh, all you have to do is this, 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 and this.
right.
But when you're doing it,
It seems like
so painful.
So there is light at the end of the tunnel, is what you're saying.
Exactly. But just in hindsight, it's like if you have an idea for a product, it's like, oh, you can literally like, get in touch with the company and they connect you with a factory and
Yeah,
you work through the process and then you figure out the cost for different tooling, molding, whatever processes they need to make whatever product you have, whether it's plastic or metal or electronics or you name it.
sure.
And then they just can do that.
Yeah,
And it's like, oh, this is fascinating. You just have things made.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think people, I guess it depends on how motivated you are, right? Like, if people wanna do it, they'll find a way,
Yeah.
and if they're a little bit scared, they'll find a reason not to do it. So I think that's bodes to the fact that like if you really want to do something, it's possible. It's all possible to do, and
Yeah.
probably not as difficult as you'd think either, but it's painful either way.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What tips would you give? What are like your top tips to somebody who, regardless of crowdfunding or not, just
Yeah.
wants to launch a new product?
So for that, I would go back to the powers of social media, which, as I mentioned earlier, kind of like saved our backside during
Yeah,
the campaign. And in that, two takeaways, which I think you can find doing research for like best practices of posting on social media.
sure.
Uh, but to be a broken record with everybody else to say being genuine and being authentic, obviously people can smell an ad a mile away. So you need to post. And like we've seen that in our own posts in our channels where it's like as soon as we make a post that looks a little bit more like gimmicky, company, salesy, check out our discount,
Yeah.
when it's just us being ourselves, talking about what's going on, it does much better. So
Mm.
people want that authenticity. They want genuine, you know, people know.
Yeah.
And the other thing, which I found to be an interesting realization, is that you need to be controversial.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is not as something so like horrific as talking about which way to put the toilet paper on the roll, forward or backwards. That's really going to get people up in arms.
Forward.
But
Forward.
like we had a post just recently where we were making ranch water with one of our backers in Texas.
Uh-huh.
The tequila he used, oh, the firestorm in the comments section.
Oh,
People went nuts. And when your video creates comments and the algorithm sees that people are interacting with your video,
uh-huh.
it drives the algorithm to get more views for your video. So like we had a video where I put PBR in one of the kegs. Oh,
Sure.
I can't believe you're using a system like that with garbage beer, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
People love PBR when you're
it
calling.
won a blue ribbon. You leave it alone.
Yeah.
But again, like by having a post where you do something or you talk about something, and it doesn't have to be in like an inflammatory controversy. It doesn't have to be something
Sure.
really like, I'm not trying to get into politics on my Cooler Cake channel, but just something as simple as like, oh, I like this beer. You're going to find
Right.
somebody who doesn't, and they're going to tell you.
Right. Well, and
And
that's about being authentic, right? Just having like
again,
a human presence,
yeah,
which now is being very challenged by all the presence of AI. So that's going to be
yes,
interesting to see what the dynamics will look like, how things will change because people
right.
are going to be using AI to generate content, and
Mhm.
we'll know the difference.
But yeah, but going back to it, that would be my recommendation to somebody is
Okay.
try and incorporate something that has playfully has two sides to
Yeah.
what you're talking about, and it'll drive the comment section, and that drives the algorithm, and that's how you can get a lot more views on your posts.
I feel like they did that really well with like remember when they launched the most interesting man in the world?
Yes.
They did a really great way of, like, generating a fake message, but, like, with a funny humor and
Mhm.
kinda, like, being authentic to the brand,
Yeah.
without pushing it too far where people were like, but he was ridiculous."
Right.
So, that was the point, and I
It's
think
him and, who's the guy for the insurance company that he's, he's chaos or something?
oh, yeah,
He's like the tree limb that falls in your car. He's like the
and he's
thing.
always, like, beat
He's
up.
always
Yes.
yeah. Being
Well,
playful.
I feel like yeah, I feel like people can learn from, like, that most interesting man in the world, the state
Yeah.
I don't know if it's
Is the
State
State Farm?
Farm, maybe, and then there's Flow, obviously from Progressive, like,
Mhm.
those really, like, I think there is a element of humor that people are drawn to,
Right.
so if you can not take your brand so seriously sometimes,
Yeah.
you know, keep it authentic, I think that's a great lesson to learn.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
This is great.
Obviously, we'll have all the links to everything. We'll probably pull in I wanna find that TikTok. I'm gonna pull it into this video, and we'll have the links to your website. When do you think the next round of cooler kegs will be available for the
Oh,
public?
they are available now.
They're available now. Awesome.
We
And the
have
website
inventory.
is?
Thecoolerkeg.com.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. Well, maybe not first, but all right, thanks for sharing your story. I think we can pull away a lot of great crowdfunding and startup tips from here, and we look forward to seeing what happens next.
Thank you so much for having me.